presentación. Invitamos ahora a la señora Filipa Rio, Sustainable Mobility Director de la WLPGA en Francia, quien nos hablará de los nuevos mercados de autogás. Bienvenida, Filipa Rio.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you about the future of Autogás. So today, I would like to cover where we currently stand with global demand, what opportunities exist for Autogás, what are the key drivers for growth. I'm also going to provide a few examples of market success stories, and I'll close by discussing where we could be 20 years from now. So LPG was first used as a transportation fuel 70 years ago, and today it accounts for approximately 9% of total global demand. Production of LPG has never been stronger, as Walt mentioned earlier, and forecasters are saying that we're going to have a supply surplus for years to come. And the prices are also relatively stable, yet global demand is falling for the first time in decades. So why is this happening, and can we turn it around? One of the reasons for the decline is that the demand for autogas is concentrated in just a few countries, and some of those markets are now showing signs of maturity with declining volumes. Of course, we do have new and emerging markets like the Ukraine and hopefully Colombia, where it helps to maintain autogas as a very important segment of the LPG industry. But certainly, if we are to ensure the long-term success of autogas, we will have to diversify our markets. So autogas is mostly concentrated in just two regions, in Europe and Eurasia, as well as Asia Pacific. So Asia Pacific is dominated by South Korea, which has unfortunately been in decline for the past few years, but there is a very good news story there that I'll get to in just a bit. And Europe and Eurasia continue to show signs of growth with new markets emerging. And the rest of the world has been growing steadily, but from a lower base. So here you have the global figures per region. As Allison mentioned, there are 27 million vehicles running on autogas today, making it the #1 alternative fuel in the world to diesel and gasoline. I think that's quite an impressive figure that many people are not aware of. 27 million vehicles in the world. Just for comparison, there's about 5 million vehicles, electric vehicles. There's over 78,000 refueling stations, which deliver nearly 27 million tons of LPG per year. So here you have the autogas trends for the last few years for autogas markets above 50,000 tons a year. We do have strong growth in North America, but of course there is still room for growth, especially in the heavy-duty segment and in fleets. There's strong growth in Central and South America, especially in Panama and Venezuela, but we are seeing some declines in Mexico, and there are opportunities, of course, in Argentina as well as Colombia. In Africa, autogas is mainly about Algeria, but other countries could emerge there, such as South Africa and Nigeria. And as I mentioned, the picture is mixed in Europe. We have historic markets in Western Europe that are declining, but there is growth in countries like Spain and Portugal, Italy, and Greece. Asia Pacific has been the region really which has shown the most decline in the last few years, but we do have new opportunities in South Korea, and we do have some new emerging markets in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, especially in the 2- and 3-wheeled segment. So what are some of the key opportunities to promote autogas? I'm sure everyone here is well aware of the Volkswagen scandal, emission scandal of 2015. This scandal has really discredited diesel. And what I find very interesting is that the saga continues to dominate headlines 4 years later. So diesel has really been deemed as the new tobacco, Apparently, walking down the streets in London is the equivalent of smoking 20 cigarettes a day. The World Health Organization has deemed diesel as the new tobacco, and it's a major cancer risk. Just in Europe alone, there's over 400,000 premature deaths a year linked to air quality problems. So the UN has also stated that around the world, 9 out of 10 people live in places where air quality limits exceed safety standards. So there's tremendous public pressure, mostly led by environmental NGOs, to clean up the air. So as a result, we're seeing major cities around the world, as Allison mentioned, ban the internal combustion engine vehicle. This is good and bad because although we want diesel, there is a market opportunity for autogas with diesel losing market share. We also need the internal combustion engine, right? LPG runs on the internal combustion engine, so it's a bit of a catch-22, so we need to really continue to promote technology neutrality. We're also seeing low emission zones proliferating in urban city centers, and policymakers are very much looking for alternative fuels. However, most of the focus on how to solve this air quality problem has been on electric vehicles. Even major automakers, most of them by now, have announced plans to electrify their fleets. But as we know, all available solutions are going to be needed to mitigate the air quality problem, and electric vehicles still have many barriers to overcome. You have range anxiety, you have grid capacity, you have end of life, life cycle emissions, consumer acceptance, etc. So I think, in fact, most of the pollution problems actually come from the existing fleet that's on the road, right? It's not the new car that you're going to buy that's going to be dirty, or the electric vehicle. So Autogas really has a tremendous opportunity there as well, and can be incentivized to really convert these older, more polluting vehicles. So in 2017, the WLPGA conducted a global study on emissions to determine just how clean autogas is. And on a well-to-wheel basis, autogas has a relatively low carbon footprint, almost no pollutant emissions, and it performs very well in engines. I think we've heard all of this already. In some cases, autogas even outperforms electric vehicles depending on where the energy comes from to produce the electricity. So we know it's clean, but we also know it's a mature and readily available technology. It has the existing infrastructure and a low cost for the consumer and for governments, really, compared to electric vehicle subsidies. And as Allison mentioned, we really need to stick to these numbers and to these statistics to give a clear and consistent message, and to give a clear position on autogas and what that is. So the WLPGA, as Allison mentioned, has created a number of materials to support the autogas case. I won't go into this too much, but this is the summary of the Charter of Benefits for autogas specifically. And as you can see, it's quite visual. It gives you all of the highlights right up front, and this is really, really great material to use with policymakers because they need things to be simplified, and they really don't like to read more than one page. So this is just one example of the content that Allison has mentioned and that we've worked together to develop, and it's available on our website. So I very much urge you. I think it's also an editable format, so people can go and make changes and translate it to your own language, etc. Right, so we have all of this potential for autogas right now. As I mentioned, there's a need to diversify transport fuels. There's a global increase in LPG awareness thanks to an industry effort. We've got increasing urban air pollution issues, etc. So what we need now is really a concerted effort by all of the interested parties to come together and really seize this opportunity. So that brings me to the key drivers for autogas. In order for autogas to succeed, it really requires three supporting players. Government, the automotive industry, and LPG suppliers. It's sort of the three-legged stool as it's been referred to in the past. So in terms of the government, you really need a long-term policy to send a clear market signal, and this can include fiscal and regulatory incentives. From OEMs, this means that automakers really need to be able to offer models to the consumer. I think currently there's about 120 models offered globally by, I think, 15 or more OEMs. And if they're not offering original equipment, manufactured vehicles, then you really need an established aftermarket for conversions. And in terms of LPG distributors, of course, we need a comprehensive refueling network to ensure that the consumer can fill their cars. And LPG distributors, of course, need to comply with all international standards and make safety really, really paramount. So with all of these factors in place, the task is then to ensure that there's a positive and strong consumer perception for Autogas, tying it all together. So let me just quickly review some examples of country-specific case studies where I think really exemplify these key drivers. So first we have Turkey. Turkey leads autogas consumption in Europe. It comprises 80% of the total LPG demand. Okay, so Turkey is the only country in the world that has more vehicles running on LPG than diesel or petrol. So autogas consumption there has doubled since 2010, and really this strong position is all due to a very concerted industry communications plan that included heavy paid media and TV advertising, and it's been particularly powerful at improving the consumer perception. In Turkey, it was very much viewed as a poor man's fuel, etc., and the industry really went all out, putting lots and lots of money towards TV advertising to show LPG as a high-performance fuel. So Spain is a small but fast-growing market. Spain, the government actually wanted to reduce diesel imports, of course, due to air pollution concerns, so they've incentivized LPG through a low excise tax. And they've also added some grants and rebates, not only for conversions, but also for vehicle purchases, but this is mostly at the local level, not at the national level. They've targeted schools, driving schools, so fleets, to promote autogas, and I think one very key factor here is that the LPG vehicle there is able to have the eco label, so it's able to circulate within the urban city centers that are otherwise restricted. So this is a really huge incentive for consumers to buy an LPG vehicle. So I'll just quickly talk about South Korea, which is a really good news story. It's the #1 autogas market in the world, and this comes from the fact that there were air quality restrictions for diesel taxis, which means that currently 95% of all taxis in South Korea run on LPG. But the demand started to fall away as diesel re-entered the market, and so there was a very strong lobbying campaign, again, a concerted industry effort, to go speak to the government, and as a result, the government actually lifted barriers on the consumer purchase of these vehicles to promote clean fuel. So before, it was only fleets and taxis that were allowed to run on LPG, and consumers' individual car purchases couldn't be autogas, and now those restrictions have been lifted. And in just 1 month, autogas car sales rose by 40%. And the industry actually estimates that autogas demand will double by 2030. So LPG, or the WLPGA actually looked at these different case studies, lessons learned, best practices, and really took all of their industry expertise to develop this guide to new autogas markets. It was published last year, and again, it's available on our website, so I highly encourage everyone to go take a look, especially if you're considering developing a business model for autogas. And the purpose is to create a toolkit and encourage autogas in new markets. This has a checklist for 3 phases. So it's basically a comprehensive step-by-step approach to really help you to develop new autogas markets. And I actually encourage existing markets to take a look because, you know, if you're stagnant or you haven't had strong growth, I think this is also a great tool to kind of take a look at and see if there are ways to jumpstart the market. So I'll very quickly run through the phases. I'm not going to go through each checkpoint, but basically the first is the prep phase, and essentially you want to establish a focused industry voice and confirm that there's market potential. For the second phase, it's the engagement phase where you really want to assemble the industry with other partners and develop a roadmap, and then start to bring the government in to ensure that you have a favorable long-term policy. And then the last phase is the deployment phase. But again, I would say the key takeaways from this guide really boil down to the key drivers as well. You need a long-term regulatory environment from the government. You need OEM support, or at least an established aftermarket conversion program, a refueling network combined with standards and safety practices to ensure the consumer confidence. And as Allison mentioned, in parallel, I think we need a very strong communications campaign speaking off of the same talking points to really, you know, broaden the message and make the case for autogas. So, which leads me to the end of my presentation, which is talking about the future of autogas, so where we're going to be 20 years from now. What's going to happen in the next 20 years is really quite hard to predict. The transport sector is seeing tremendous changes and disruption. There's a ton of pressure on fossil fuels. There's a surge of interest in electric vehicles, and maintaining our relevance is getting harder and harder. But we do have a really great news story to tell, right? I mean, we have excess supplies, we have low and stable prices, we have existing infrastructure, it's a cleaner fuel, so the conditions really are ripe for autogas development. But where does it fit in the new transportation fuel portfolio of the future? So this is the question we really attempted to answer with this new global autogas roadmap that was published in March of this year. And this was produced with help from 2 consultants, with Menicon Consulting. Some of you may know Trevor Morgan, who assisted in drafting this document, as well as TM Leuven, which is a research center based in Belgium that's quite credible. So what we did in this roadmap is we basically reviewed prospects for autogas to 2040 in a business as usual scenario. So that's the baseline, that's the status quo. If nothing changes, where will we be in 2040? And we also established an aspirational target of doubling the global market share of autogas, and that's this alternative scenario that you're seeing there. So if we were to double market share, so instead of 27 million, we have around 60 million vehicles in 2040, what does that mean, and what are the quantitative estimates of the social, economic, and environmental benefits from those projections? So, I mean, just to summarize, again, this roadmap is on our website. I urge you to go take a look and to use these key numbers and figures in your advocacy efforts as well, because I think they're quite impressive. So you'll see here that to 2040, there's a 4% reduction of global emissions of NOx overall, 5% in PM 2.5 to 2040, 130 million tons of CO2 saved. And all of this, the total value of the social, economic, and environmental benefits achieved compared to a business as usual case are over $54 billion. So, to sum up, I mean, I think it's quite clear. As I mentioned before, fossil fuels are being targeted. We have this energy transition that's taking place, and where does LPG and autogas specifically fit in there? And I would say, and I would argue that it's a balance of fuels and technologies, really in a transitional way. That's the actual pathway to clean transport future. I mean, electric vehicles absolutely have a role to play, and actually Autogas in this roadmap shows that it does not compete with electric vehicles and actually complements it. And as I say here, actually plays a bridging fuel role towards this future transport world. And so we really, we need to tell this story. We need to continue to push for technology neutrality. We should be pushing for emissions performance standards and not technology standards in order to maintain the relevance of LPG. And again, this will be, this will require a concerted effort by all interested parties and all stakeholders, really to make this a reality. And beyond 2040, again, I think we need to walk a very fine line here, because to just say that autogas is a bridging fuel really takes us out of the conversation, beyond 2050 and carbon neutrality. So we do need to say that currently what we have now to offer is a bridging fuel, but we are heavily investing in bio-LPG. It's already commercially available, even if it's in small quantities. But I think that, that will obviously be our future, and that's what we need to continue to talk about, to make sure that, that we continue to promote autogas as a relevant fuel and a relevant energy pathway in the future. So before I thank you for your time and attention, I also wanted to just take a quick moment. I know Allison's already mentioned the World LPG Forum and European Congress that's taking place in Amsterdam, but I do wanted to point your attention to the inaugural Autogas Day event that's taking place on that Friday the 27th. It's a half-day conference, and I think it's proving to be a really excellent event that's coming together. We have a selection of panels that will discuss industry trends, challenges, opportunities, etc. We have experts from all around the world, so they're going to be providing their different perspectives and their realities and best practices. We even have an OEM panel, which it's getting harder and harder to really have these established connections with OEMs. And so I think it's, from my perspective, really important to reestablish those connections. So we have Renault speaking, which is one of our biggest partners in the auto industry. We have ASEA, which is the national association that represents automobile manufacturers in Europe. So it's really proving to be a great event. And actually, various national associations and different companies are supporting this event by holding either a similar event that same week, or they're supporting us through social media activity, because of course we have hashtag Autogas Day. And I think one of the things we really need to do together is to broaden the reach and amplify the message, and really try to create a dialogue and get out of our industry bubble where we're only talking to ourselves about autogas, but really to push that message beyond. So with that, I will thank you for your time and your attention.